My sister and I have never had the opportunity to go on a holiday together, just the two of us. We have gone on several trips with our mom in the past. Our parents are divorced, but our mother was the type of holiday planner who would make everything quite stressful. Our vacations would consist of cultural tours, long bus trips, and airplane rides. So we decided to book a 5-day trip to a place neither of us had been before. We both dislike staying in one place for more than a week, as it becomes monotonous and restless. We wanted an adventure. For the first time, we decided to use Airbnb for our accommodation. The place we stayed at was amazing. It was located on the top floor of a building and had a huge balcony that provided a stunning view of the intersection and the streets extending to the port. One street led directly to the port, while another took us past tennis courts and parking lots near hotels. My sister and I would often go out for dinner, and we enjoyed the delicious seafood. As the days went by, we ventured further away from our apartment, discovering new restaurants. On our last day, we found a restaurant that served sea urchin, which was about a 45-minute journey from our place. The people there were incredibly friendly, and they would always offer free desserts after lunch or dinner. They also served us a potent brandy called Rocky, which was quite strong. As someone who isn't experienced with drinking, I couldn't handle more than one shot glass. I left the remaining brandy for my sister, who could tolerate alcohol much better than I could. We left the restaurant feeling satisfied and walked along the port back home. The streets were always bustling with tourists, but as we reached the tennis courts, something unexpected caught our attention. A group of gypsies had set up their night camp on the parking lots near the tennis court. This made me feel uneasy because we were the only two girls in the area, apart from the group. It's important to note that Greece is a common landing port for refugees and gypsies, although we hadn't encountered many during our stay. My sister was still a bit happy from the alcohol when suddenly I heard shuffling steps behind me. I could see the shadow of a skinny but tall man approaching. I listened carefully to his footsteps, and though he was still far enough that he couldn't grab me suddenly, I felt a strong sense of unease. Wearing high platforms, I directed my sister in front of me. The man started picking up his pace, trying to match our walking speed. He greeted us, but I chose not to respond. He came up next to my right side, and I observed him. He was skinny yet muscular, and there was something off about his leg, suggesting a limp. I had no desire to engage with someone like him in the middle of the night. Curious, my sister asked me who he was. I replied, "I don't know. Let's keep walking." He passed me and attempted to communicate with my sister, perhaps assuming she would be easier to persuade due to her slightly intoxicated appearance. He spoke in a foreign language, to which my sister timidly responded, "Sorry, we only speak English." Sensing danger, I rushed to my sister's side and pulled her onto the street, urging her not to speak to him and to keep moving. That's when he made a grab for her arm, trying to pull her back. In that intense moment, a fierce expression crossed my face, conveying a clear message of protection for my sister. I stepped forward and forcefully shoved him in the chest while shouting, "No." Due to his limp, he stumbled backward. I kept my gaze fixed on him as I held my sister's hand tightly and walked faster. To my dismay, he started grinning. Finally, we reached the intersection and hurriedly made our way into the house. The front door was always left open, so I quickly ushered my sister into the elevator and up to the 3rd floor. She was visibly shaken from the man's attempt to grab her, but her anger outweighed her fear. We locked the door and kept the lights off. From the balcony, we could see the man lingering around the entrance of our building, going in and out for at least an hour before he finally left. I am a 23-year-old male who used to work as a contracted employee for Airbnb, specifically in their Tier 1 customer service department. For those unfamiliar with Airbnb, it is a hospitality service where ordinary individuals can rent out their homes or apartments to others as an alternative to staying in a hotel. Although it is a nice concept, it operates in a legal gray area. While there are no laws explicitly prohibiting it, there are also no laws that guarantee the rights of tenants as they would have with a lease or a mortgage. If a host decides to cancel a reservation, the contract becomes null and void, and guests must vacate the property. Failure to do so can result in trespassing charges if the host chooses to press charges. Recently, I had an accident where I totaled my car after sliding on a patch of black ice during a snowstorm. The suspension on the left side of my car was damaged, so I had to rely on the light rail for transportation. Fortunately, I lived next to a light rail station, and my workplace was less than a quarter-mile away from another station. I informed my office about the situation, explaining that I would be late due to the car accident. Thankfully, they were understanding. I arrived an hour later and was seated between two talkative girls, Lily and Amy, who were engaged in a conversation. The intention was to get them to quiet down and pay attention, but it didn't work as Lily would lean forward and ignore my presence. Amy did the same, making it challenging to focus on the instructor. Susan, another girl in the room, attempted to join their conversation, but her comments seemed forced and pretentious. She had no clue about the topic at hand, and it came across as rude. During our first break, the conversation shifted to relationships. Lily was single and interested in our trainer, while Amy was engaged. As for me, I was dating a girl I had liked since childhood and planned to propose to her soon. They enthusiastically helped me plan the proposal, offering suggestions and advice. They seemed more excited about it than I was. While chatting in the front lobby, Susan approached us and hijacked the conversation, mentioning that she had a boyfriend too. She went on to describe him, his age, his own house, and his car. Susan was 20, and it struck me as odd that she was dating someone 8 years older. The more we asked, the more it seemed like she had fabricated this relationship. Her behavior made me uncomfortable, especially when she would glance at me, making me feel uneasy. I firmly believed that for a relationship to work, there had to be some level of physical attraction, and I was not attracted to Susan in any way. After the training day ended, I made my way to the light rail station, and Amy kindly offered to give me a ride home since it was on her way. I appreciated her offer and suggested filling up her gas tank as a gesture of gratitude. Unexpectedly, Susan asked for a ride to the light rail station near my house, even though there was a closer one. At first, I didn't think much of it, but looking back, it seemed like more than a coincidence. I asked Amy to drop me off at my leasing office instead, as I didn't want anyone to know my exact address. My roommate and I had decided to order pizza due to the heavy snowfall, and I wanted something to distract myself since I had just lost my car. We waited for about 45 minutes for the pizza, understanding that the weather conditions would cause delays. When the delivery person arrived, he handed me a letter along with the pizza. It caught my attention since we had just moved in and hadn't met our neighbors yet. I opened the letter without much thought, regretting it immediately. The envelope was adorned with hearts, and inside, I found the initials G and FS with an arrow through it. I wondered how Susan knew which building and apartment I lived in. I tore the letter into pieces and discarded it, not anticipating what would happen next. The following day at work, Susan approached me and asked if I had received the present she left for me. In response, I asked her how she found out where I lived. She admitted to using her admin credentials to access my test, listing from training. She claimed she thought it was okay, trying to act shy and innocent. I snapped at her, expressing my discontent and warning her never to come to my house again. I threatened to involve the authorities if she persisted. It was a gross invasion of my privacy, especially considering that I was in a committed relationship and planning to propose soon. 2 weeks passed, and Susan continued to insert herself into conversations with Lily and Amy, turning them into discussions about her and her boyfriend's intimate activities. It made me uncomfortable to hear such explicit details, especially at work. Our conversations had never ventured into that territory. Susan also started messaging me on Google Hangouts, as that was our primary means of communication on the production floor. She would send messages like, "I'm sorry, please forgive me," or "I really like you, can we start over?" I chose to ignore these messages, and as they became more aggressive, I eventually blocked her. However, the constant barrage continued, with messages asking why I didn't like her and making inappropriate propositions. She even threatened to accuse me of rape if I didn't comply with her requests. Feeling trapped, I finally reported the situation to HR, explaining Susan's stalking behavior and her misuse of admin privileges to access my personal information. Unfortunately, my complaint was initially brushed off, with HR suggesting that it was just a crush and implying that men couldn't be victims of sexual harassment. Another month went by, and I was promoted to Tier 2, although it didn't come with a pay raise. The transition meant additional responsibilities, such as mediating disputes between hosts and guests. Amy, Lily, Susan, and I were assigned to separate teams, but Susan continued to follow me around, even standing behind me at the drinking fountain before returning to her seat without taking a sip. 2 weeks later, I was called into HR's office, hoping that the issue was finally being addressed. However, I was wrong. They informed me that Susan had accused me of sexual assault, claiming that I had attempted to rape her in the bathroom. I was dumbfounded, questioning the evidence they had against me. They replied that her word alone was sufficient, as why would someone lie about such a serious matter? Despite having every reason to keep something like that hidden, I decided to leave. Security tried to stop me, but I pushed past them, knowing that the company couldn't charge me with anything until the police were involved. I returned to my desk, desperate for evidence to support my innocence. Thankfully, I had taken screenshots of all the messages Susan had sent me over the past 3 months. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. As they handcuffed me, I shouted, asking them to look at my computer screen. All eyes in the production floor turned to me, and most people put their customers on hold to witness the unfolding events. One of the officers sat down at my desk and examined the messages. After what felt like an eternity, he stood up and said, "Let him go." They brought Susan over, and the officer confronted her, asking if I had raped her. She tearfully denied it, claiming that I had made unwanted advances towards her, but she wasn't interested. The cop wasn't convinced and pointed out a message she had sent 2 months earlier, threatening to accuse me of rape if I didn't let her come to my house. Her story crumbled, and the officer warned her about the consequences of lying. Still, she persisted with her false accusation, leading to my arrest. I was taken to the police station for questioning, and they conducted a rape kit on Susan. They requested a DNA sample from me for comparison. I complied, spending the next 2 days in jail. On the 3rd day, I was released without any charges filed against me, as Susan had finally admitted to fabricating the entire incident. I was given the option to press charges for the false accusation and pursue a defamation case, but I decided against it. I was relieved that she had been fired, and I settled for a restraining order. Unfortunately, my girlfriend couldn't trust me anymore due to the ordeal, and we broke up, even though I was found innocent. On the bright side, I was able to return the ring and use the funds to buy a new car. A few months later, my lease ended, and I moved to a different part of town. I found a new job and prayed every day that I would never cross paths with Susan again. Last year, during a vacation, I stayed at a small 2-bedroom Airbnb. It served as a rest stop for the night on my way to another Airbnb, where I would spend the majority of my vacation. As expected, the place was clean and empty. Upon arrival, I took a walk around the entire house to familiarize myself with it before bringing in my luggage. Sitting on the couch, it was around 8 p.m., and I found myself dozing off a bit. Suddenly, the sound of the doorbell ringing startled me awake. Confused and alarmed, I glanced over at the front door. Being a small young girl, I tend to get easily scared, particularly when alone at night and confronted by strangers. I cautiously approached the door, hearing 2 men whispering on the other side. Since the door lacked a safety lock, I decided to keep it shut and called out to them. "Hello. Hey, we're here for the Airbnb. Can you open the door?" One of the men called out. Perplexed, I asked them to clarify what they meant by being here for the Airbnb. The man responded, informing me that he had booked the place for the night. Sensing a mistake, I shouted through the door that I had also booked the place and suggested he contact the owner. The man didn't seem pleased with my response, which I understood since I would likely feel the same in his position. I heard one set of footsteps moving away from the door, while the other man asked once again if I could open the door so we could discuss the situation. At that moment, I was tempted to give in and reached for the doorknob, finding him somewhat believable. However, something inside me urged caution. Instead, I mentioned that my husband would come down shortly to handle the matter, hoping this would catch him off guard and dissuade any ill intentions. The man remained silent. Waiting for a minute, I didn't hear any footsteps retreating. Curiosity got the better of me, so I pulled aside the short curtain and peered through the small window. To my horror, I saw the man I had been speaking to, facing his car parked in the driveway. Beyond him stood a group of approximately 5 people, chillingly concealing themselves as if awaiting a signal. They all wore some form of face coverings. Unable to see the other side of the door, I assumed there were more individuals present. Realizing that this was likely a gang, given the city I was in, I was utterly terrified. Panic-stricken, I retreated from the door, trying to prevent myself from hyperventilating. I hurriedly went to the bedroom to retrieve my phone and dialed emergency services, desperately attempting to remain calm. The operator advised me to stay quiet and composed, assuring me that help was on the way and would arrive within minutes. I remained on the line, all the while hearing footsteps circling the house. It felt as though I were surrounded by a pack of wolves, with the threat of them smashing the windows and breaking in at any moment. Taking my phone into the bathroom with me, I continued my conversation with the operator. Suddenly, a horrifying sound echoed through the house, the bending and snapping of wood coming from the front door. Tears streamed down my face as I pressed my hand against my mouth, attempting to stifle my cries. I listened helplessly as the group rushed inside, opening doors and rifling through cabinets. Eventually, one of them approached the bathroom door and attempted the handle, yelling in frustration before moving away. The group continued their looting spree until the distant sound of sirens grew louder. Fearing apprehension, they hastily scattered, leaving the premises. By the time the police entered, all my belongings were gone, and my car had been vandalized and looted, its window shattered. One of the officers stayed with me to gather details, informing me that they had been dealing with issues involving large groups or gangs breaking into homes lately. Their main objective seemed to be robbing residents of their possessions rather than causing harm. That's likely why they left me unharmed in the bathroom. They didn't consider me a threat. Regardless of their intentions, the experience was incredibly terrifying. Although it probably had little to do with the Airbnb itself, it has left me anxious every time I stay at one now. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me.